Do I need glasses? Yes. Yes, I need glasses. And maybe better lighting. Nah, I think I'm okay with this one. Although it's like glaring me in the eyes, you can see it reflecting off of my glasses. The light, look into the light. Yes, it's reflecting off of my glasses. Ooh. I'll have to fix that. Anyways, good evening. And welcome back to Fairy Tales. Our last episode was Thumbelina. And it ended happily, I think. It started out happy, and then the poor tiny thing was captured by some frogs. I won't get too deep because I don't want to spoil it for those who want to actually go back and listen to my read. But I think it was a happy ending, and I actually had a wonderful feeling at the end of it. Like even the hair stood on the end of my skin. It was quite nice. Little twist at the end that I liked. But it's up to you to read that if you want to go back and listen to my read. Today, in episode 3, is The Brave Tin Soldier. There were once 25 tin soldiers, who were all brothers, for they had been made out of the same old tin spoon. They shouldered arms and looked straight before them, and wore a splendid uniform, red and blue. The first thing in the world they've ever heard were the words tin soldiers, uttered by little boys, who clapped his hands with delight when the lid of the box in which they lay was taken off. They were given him for a birthday present, and he stood at the table to set them up. The soldiers were all exactly alike, except one, who had only one leg. He had been left to the last, and then there was not enough of the melting tin to finish him, so they made him to stand firmly on one leg, and this caused him to be very remarkable. The table on which the tin soldier stood was covered with other playthings, but the most attractive to the eye was a pretty little paper castle. Through the small windows the room would be seen. In front of the castle a number of little trees surrounded a piece of looking glass, which was intended to represent a transparent lake. Swans, made of wax, swam on the lake, and were reflected in it. All this was very pretty, but the prettiest of all was the tiny little lady who stood at the open door of the castle. She also was made of paper, and she wore a dress of clear muslin, with a narrow blue ribbon over her shoulder, just like a scarf. In front of these fixed a glistening tinsel rose, as large as her whole face. The little lady was a dancer, and she stretched out both her arms, and raised one of her legs so high that the tin soldier could not see it at all, and he thought she, like himself, had only one leg. That is the wife for me, he thought, but she is too grand and lives in a castle, while I have only a box to live in, 25 of us together. That is no place for her. Still, I must try and make her acquaintance. Then he laid himself at full length on the table behind a snuff-box and stood upon it, so that he could peep at the little delicate lady, who continued to stand on one leg without losing her balance. When evening came, the other tin soldiers were all placed in the box, and the people of the house went to bed. Then the playthings began to have their own games together, to pay visits, to sham fights, to give balls. The tin soldiers rattled in their box. They wanted to get out and join the amusements, but they could not open the lid. The nutcrackers played at leapfrog, and a pencil jumped about the table. There was such a noise that the canary woke up and began to talk. And in poetry, too. Only the tin soldier and the dancer remained in their places. She stood on tiptoe, with her legs stretched out as firmly as he did on his one leg. He never took his eyes from her for even a moment. The clock struck 12, and with a bounce up sprang the lid of the snuff-box. But instead of snuff, there jumped a little black goblin. For the snuff-box was a toy puzzle. "Tin soldier," said the goblin, "don't wish for what does not belong to you." But the tin soldier pretended not to hear. "Very well, wait till tomorrow then," said the goblin. When the children came in the next morning, they placed the tin soldier in the window. Now, whether it was a goblin who did it or the drought, why the word drought? This can't be drought. Drought. No. D-R-A-U-G-H-T. Draft? Now, whether it was a goblin who did it or the draft, it is not known. Oh, I should have kept reading. Sometimes you need to get through the context. A little bit ADD. Or the draft is not known, but the window flew open, and out fell the tin soldier, heels over head from the third story into a street beneath. It was a terrible fall, for he came head downwards, his helmet and his bayonet stuck between the flagstones, and his one leg up in the air. The servant maid and the little boy went downstairs directly to look for him, but he was nowhere to be seen, although once they nearly trod upon him. If he had called out, "Here I am," it would have been all right, but he was too proud to cry out for help while he wore a uniform. Presently it began to rain, and the drops fell faster and faster, till there was a heavy shower. When it was over, two boys happened to pass by, and one of them said, "Look, there's a tin soldier. He ought to have a boat to sail in." So they made a boat out of newspaper and placed the tin soldier in it and sent him sailing down the gutter. While the two boys ran side by side and clapping their hands. Good gracious, what large waves arose in the gutter, and how fast the stream rolled on, for rain had been very heavy. The paper boat rocked up and down and turned itself round sometimes so quickly that the tin soldier trembled, yet he remained firm. His countenance did not change. He looked straight before him and shouldered his musket. Suddenly the boat shot under a bridge which formed a part of a drain, and then it was dark as the tin soldier's box. "Where am I going now?" he thought. "This is the black goblin's fault, I'm sure. Ah, well, if the little lady were only here with me in the boat, I should not care for any darkness." Suddenly there appeared a great water rat, who lived in the drain. "Have you a passport?" asked the rat. "Give it to me at once." But the tin soldier remained silent and held his musket tighter than ever. The boat sailed on. The rat followed it. How he'd gnash his teeth and cry out to the bits of wood and straw, "Stop him! Stop him! He has not paid toll. He has not shown pass." But the stream rushed on stronger and stronger. The stream rushed on stronger and stronger. There's no screaming happening here yet. The tin soldier could already see daylight, shining enough to frighten the bravest man, and at the end of the tunnel the drain fell into a large... I'm going to read that again. The tin soldier heard a roaring sound quite terrible enough to frighten the bravest man. At the end of the tunnel, the drain fell into a large canal over a steep place, which made it as dangerous for him as a waterfall would be to us. He was too close to it to stop, so the boat rushed on. And the poor tin soldier could only hold himself as stiffly as possible, without moving an eyelid, to show that he was not afraid. The boat whirled round 3-4 times, and then filled with water to the very edge. Nothing could save it from sinking. He now stood up to his neck in water, while deeper and deeper sank the boat, and the paper became soft, the loose with the wet. till at last the water closed over the soldier's head. He thought of the elegant little dancer whom he should never see again, and the words of the song sounded in his ears. Farewell, warrior ever brave, drifting onward to the grave. Then the paper boat fell into pieces. That's what happens, waterlogged. And the soldier sank into the water, and immediately afterward was swallowed by a great fish. Oh, how dark it was inside the fish! A great deal darker in the tunnel, and narrower too, but the tin soldier continued firm, and lay at full length, shouldering his musket. The fish swam to and fro, making the most wonderful movements, but at last he became quite still. After a while, a flash of lightning seemed to pass through him, and then the daylight approached, and a voice cried out, I declare, here is a tin soldier. The fish had been caught, taken to market, and sold to the cook, who took him to the kitchen and cut him open with a large knife. She picked up the soldier and held him by waist between her finger and thumb, and carried him into the room. They were anxious to see this wonderful soldier who had traveled about inside a fish, but he was not at all proud. They placed him on the table, and how many curious things do happen in the world. There he was, in the very same room from the window from which he had fallen. There were the same children, the same playthings, standing on the table, the pretty castle with the elegant little dancer on the floor. She still balanced herself on one leg and held up the other, so she was as firm as himself. It touched the tin soldier so much to see her that he almost wept tin tears, but he kept them back. He only looked at her, and they both remained silent. Presently one of the little boys took up the tin soldier and threw him into the stove. Warning. Presently one of the little boys took up the tin soldier and threw him into the stove. He had no reason for doing so. Therefore it must have been the fault of the black goblin who lived in the snuff box. The flames lightened up the tin soldier as he stood. The heat was very terrible, but whether it proceeded from the real fire or from the fire of love, he could not tell. When he could see that the bright colors were faded from his uniform, but whether they had been washed off during his journey from the side effects of his sorrow, no one could say. He looked at the little lady, and she looked at him. He felt himself melting away, but still he remained firm with his gun on his shoulder. Suddenly the door of the room flew open, and the draught of air caught up the little dancer. She fluttered like a sylph right into the stove by the side of the tin soldier. It was instantly in flames and was gone. The tin soldier melted down into a lump. The next morning, when the maid servant took the ashes out of the stove, she found him in the shape of a tin heart. But the little dancer, nothing remained but the tinsel rose, which was burnt black as cinder. Good evening.